Aesthetics, the physical elements of play. These are a huge part of tabletop role-playing games for a lot of us. Today we will be talking about a piece of this that is really central, literally and figuratively, to the experience of the game for a lot of us, and that is the encounter map or the dungeon map. So today I'll be giving you some tips on how you can draw better encounter maps that will wow your players. Hi everyone, welcome to WASD20. My name is Nate, and in today's video, I hope to inspire you to really sink some time into making beautiful encounter maps for your table. And I'll be giving you 5 simple tips on how you can do that. Now before we get down to the drawing here, I do just want to quickly thank my sponsor for this video, Geek Tank Games, who is in the middle of their second Kickstarter campaign for TableTop Tokens. I've been using the first set of TableTop Tokens for almost a year now, and I absolutely love them, and the latest sets come with so many cool things that I'm really excited about. There's a link to their Kickstarter down in the video description, and also in this video you'll be seeing these TableTop Tokens in action as I use them on this actual encounter map. Tip number 1 for drawing better encounter maps is draw fat lines. You want to use really fat, thick outlines for your dungeon walls or the walls of your structures or cave walls. I recommend using something like one of these chisel tip markers. These come in dry erase for sure. You can get those Expo markers, but this one's actually a vis-a-vis marker, an Expo vis-a-vis. So these are wet erase for something like the Chessex battle mat. I'll put a link to these down in the video description, but if you're drawing on gaming paper, you know, get a big old fat Sharpie or something, or sometimes people just use butcher paper. My point is get a fat marker and really outline those walls heavily. Sometimes you can even, do like 2 outlines and then just fill in the space between, like you see me doing here. That's another way to go. But I think that drawing really thick walls for your structures just really adds a lot, makes the whole dungeon kind of pop out at the players a bit, and I just really like the look. One thing I'll just note here as we speed through the rest of the wall drawing is that one tip that I don't include here is to make your dungeons or your encounter maps more realistic. Realism is really just about as important as you want it to be. Some people will throw a fit at the notion that some people really don't value it. I generally don't value being extremely realistic with my maps. I am thinking of the gameplay aspects, and I'm often copying, ideas I have from maybe computer role-playing games and other things I've seen in popular media. So if you want to be really realistic, sometimes that is valuable, and I recommend looking at actual floor plans of places, a coliseum or a cathedral or a chapel, or maybe a map of an actual real-world cave complex. My second tip for drawing better encounter maps is to use shapes that you have. Actually outline things like bowls or cups when you're doing circles, for example. I found this to be really useful, especially for like a circular room in a dungeon, which I've done quite a few times. I find it really challenging to get a good looking circle, and while I'm okay with a little bit of imperfection, I'm not okay when my circle looks more oblong and just has one side that looks weird. So I generally use a big bowl like you can see me doing here. You can also see me doing some, using this cup to get some outlines for stairs and for like little towers on the edge of this chapel here. I don't know what I was doing, just trying to give the structure some character. You can see me using both ends of the cup on the stairs here. So yeah, make use of what you have, and sometimes you want to use a ruler. I usually don't use a ruler for my straight dungeon lines because I'm just okay with a little bit of imperfection there, and I can usually follow the grid lines well enough that they're mostly straight. Tip number 3 for drawing better encounter maps is dress it up. What I mean by this is add details to your dungeon. After you're done with your dungeon walls, after you've kind of figured out the basic structure, go in and just fill in all kinds of detail. Chairs, tables, desks, beds, piles of rubble and straw. All of these things can be really useful. And of course, here you can see me using TableTop Tokens. TableTop Tokens are super useful to this. I know this is a sponsored video, but I really mean it when I say that I love this product, and I have been using it in every single home game I have run since I got them. So we'll take a closer look at some of the tokens here on the map, but I have gotten quite a bit of use out of their original 3 sets, and these were from about 8 months ago. But I wanted to, on this mat, just put out some of the new set from the Kickstarter number 2. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. You've got some graveyard stuff. Here's a mausoleum, little stone walls, another mausoleum, and some graves. One thing I really like is that they work really well in conjunction with my own little drawing. So here I made a little pile of rubble from the grave that was dug up there. And little details like that add so much to your map. I definitely recommend just going around and putting little flecks and rocks about and scattering those sorts of things. And little things like that are just such a nice touch that I like to add. I think it adds a lot. But anyway, back to these sets here. We've got the graveyard set. This is just a very small sampling. These right here are from the dungeon set. I imagined that there was a secret passage underneath this statue here that leads to the dark underside of this very quaint small town chapel. But there's clearly much more going on here. Oh, look at these. I just love them. These are from the dungeon set as well. Instruments of torture. And getting in here, nice spike pit trap. Cool desk there. This kind of blood fountain. All of these are reversible. They all have other sides here. So this, you can have it a water fountain. I just use poster putty to stick it down, or a blood fountain. So all of them are reversible, and sometimes it's just a slight subtle color change from one side to another. Some of them are more significant, like this one or this. In addition to the graveyard and dungeon set, the new Kickstarter does also involve this rooftop set, which is really cool. They're great for just, throwing out real quickly your town, your village map, and they look so good. That's the big thing I really like about them, is they just look so much better than anything I can do, and they are so quick. I'll go ahead and show a quick selection of some of the other ones that I'm not using on my map, including the town market, which is one that I'm not using any of on this particular map. And once again, the link to their Kickstarter is in the video description. Tip number 4, you probably observed a little bit while I was showing off some of the tokens, the hatching. This is probably one of the more time-consuming steps that I would definitely say this is optional if you have time. But there are several different ways you can hatch. The way that I was doing here, I usually call the Dyson Logos method, because there's a well-known cartographer, Dyson, who does this style and does it beautifully, and I love it. I love the way it looks. You notice that I only did the hatching on my map in some of the underground sections. You could do it on your walls as well. You can kind of make thick walls. I'll put a picture of here of how that might look in the Dyson style from Dyson himself. But in addition to having really thick, dark walls on your structures, I think that having hatching is another thing that adds some dimension and really makes the dungeon pop. Kind of shading in that negative space a bit in a stylized manner. Some of the other methods of hatching that I've often seen are these ones here. This is, I don't know, just a little more neat and orderly if you're doing it this way. And I think it looks really nice as well. It's similar to the hatching style, the little more helter-skelter hatching style that I go for. And then there's also just doing straight lines. I saw this in the recent release from Wizards of the Coast, Dungeon of the Mad Mage. There's definitely a lot of this style. The style for hatching used was a little more mechanical, maybe, but it's, I think, quicker and requires less artistic ability, perhaps, if you just want to add a little dimension to your map. My final tip for drawing better encounter maps is adding a little bit of perspective, a little bit of dimension. I don't know if I'm saying this quite right. I don't have a formal background in art, and my perspective when I draw things is usually not perfect. But you can see that adding a little bit of a lip to one side of some of the structures here can make it look a little more three-dimensional. It's not a perfectly top-down view. And like adding legs to my tables, like you can see me doing here. Maybe give it the feel that there's some different elevations as well, which can add strategy for your players and things like that, trying to maintain high ground or whatever. Now, I've given you all 5 tips for how you can make better encounter maps, but I'm not gonna lie to you, this is a time-consuming process. I spent somewhere between like an hour and a half on this map right here, and sometimes you just don't have that time. Sometimes I'm lucky to get behind the DM screen on a Friday night with some vague notion of what might happen during the game, let alone thinking about painting some miniatures or spending an hour or two on an encounter map. I get it. We all have different priorities when we prep, and sometimes it's just based on what do you enjoy most and what do you find your players really get something out of. So that might not be a map like this, but I definitely recommend you try it. I think the prep is worth it. It's a lot of fun, and when you have the time, I think prep pays off. If you try some of these techniques and you want to share your battle maps with me, I would love to see pictures of what you all are doing. You can share them with me on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. I'm on all the things. And WASD20 is now on Discord and Reddit, so check me out there. I'll put links to all this stuff down in the video description. All right, everybody take care. You'll see me again very soon.